all of the other cliches aside about team, about market opportunity, when I look back at the companies I've been involved in and I sort them between ones that had successful businesses and entrepreneurs who drove those businesses and ones that were not successful. Course mapping, not a fine-grained analysis, but just separate them into two buckets. When I look at the bucket of success, those people were obsessed with their product early on. And when I look at the things that didn't work, it was a product and they cared about it and they worked hard at it, but they weren't obsessed with it. It didn't capture them, completely consume them. Okay, so I'm going to shift gears. I want to talk about the notion of startup communities. So I'm working on a book that'll be out probably in September called Startup Communities, How to Build an Entrepreneurial Ecosystem in Your City. One of the things I've learned as a book is you have to have a subtitle. So this one's Do More Faster, TechStars Lessons to Accelerate Your Startup. Venture Deals, Be Smarter Than Your Lawyer and Venture Capitalist. So you have to have like that second subtitle. That was news to me. Now you'll notice this. Every business book has a subtitle. It's totally bizarre. They all have between 200 and 250 pages as well. That's another one that's very interesting. And many of them could be 20 pages long because that's all that they're worth. Hopefully these are worth their 256 pages. I have been thinking hard about the notion of a startup community and what it takes to create a startup community. And Eric did a great job, I think, of talking about what's happening here. I have a belief that every metro area can have a vibrant long-term startup community. It is not a zero-sum game where you can have it here and not have it there. And if you actually look at the history of many countries, but especially the history of the United States, essentially every town in the US was a startup. People came to a place and they started the place. I mean, and every place has what I call natural resources, right? Historical natural resources might have been what was in the ground, the weather, the soil, what kind of grew there, the topology of the area, water, whether water was there or water wasn't there. Natural resources today are very different. You still have some of that, but they're much less important because we're not living in an industrial or an agricultural society anymore. And we're not living in an industrial society, so being next to a river doesn't matter that much. Right? If you think about where a lot of the factory towns were, they were near a river because river was a cheap way to ship stuff. We're living not even in an informational age anymore. The informational age was when I was a kid, like in the 1970s and 1980s, when they promised me a jetpack. And they said that we'd be on Mars by now. And I'd be able to get to Europe in 5 minutes by walking into a box. Now I walk through a thing and they touch me all over, and then it takes me just as long as it took when I was 5 years old to get to Europe. We're in a post-information society. We're in a different thing. It's ubiquitous. How many people here don't have a smartphone? One. It's okay. One. Two. Why not? Just curious? Oh, come on.
Getting one next month.
Okay, so you'll be down to one. And it's not true that you wouldn't know how to use one.
I wouldn't have to go to college?
No, you wouldn't have to go to college. You wouldn't have to go to college. Think about a 5-year-old today. A 5-year-old today does not know that you have to be home at a certain time to watch Happy Days on Tuesday night. And if you don't get home at the right time, you can't watch that Happy Days again for a while until they start playing the repeats in the next year. 5-year-old doesn't know that. 5-year-old doesn't know that when somebody says, what happened in 1215 in England, that if you don't know the answer, you might have to go to a thing called a library to look it up in a thing called an encyclopedia to get the answer. They take out a little piece of glass and they press their fingers on the piece of glass. We're in a different place. You've seen the videos of kids with 2-year-olds with an iPad or with a regular magazine trying to turn the pages like this, right? We're cognitive shift in the way that information works and how we interact with information. Okay? Now put that in the landscape of what we're doing. We're in a place where we've just gone through a period of time, 4 or 5 years, where the hierarchical model and the organizational man model from the 1950s completely imploded. This is the essence of the financial crisis, right? This notion that this endless growth, everything goes up in value, you have these endlessly expanding businesses and nothing has to change, it's gone. And now we have a society reinventing itself. And how does this society reinvent itself? A society in this kind of a context, society reinvents itself by creating new things. And by the people in this room taking control of their lives and creating their business and their future, rather than finding a job and having a career and going down a path. How many people here have read the book, The Startup of You? Anybody? So I'd encourage it. There's 2 books that I'd encourage in addition to mine that I think are great contemporary books that are very relevant for everybody here. One is The Startup of You, which is by Reid Hoffman, who's the chairman of LinkedIn and founder of LinkedIn and a venture capitalist now at Greylock, and Ben Casnocha, who's a mid-20-year-old good friend of mine. I met Ben when he was 14 and running his first company. And this book is essentially about creating yourself as an entrepreneur and taking control of your own experience on this planet and what you do. The other book is by a guy named Eric Ries called Lean Startup. How many people have read Lean Startup? Okay. Eric's got like an 8-month advantage on Reid and Ben because it's been out for longer. If you haven't read Lean Startup is, somebody sent me an email today, it was for an interview, and talked about business plans, and I said, I don't even know what a business plan is anymore. Like, a business plan is read the book Lean Startup and practice those principles. So if you're starting any sort of information-based business, reading this book and understanding this idea that you can build something, get it out, test it, iterate aggressively with early customers is so much more important than writing a 50-page business plan with a bunch of spreadsheets at the back. So those 2 books are sort of at the essence of this. And sort of when you take it all together, you think about this notion of reinventing yourself and this premise that I have of a startup community, I come to 4 basic principles. Again, I started this by saying every city originally was, or every town originally was, a startup. Right? Boulder, Colorado got started in the 1850s. It got started in the 1850s, or 1840s. I think a bunch of people looking for gold got tired of driving across the country to California and thought it was pretty and stopped. And I like to say that Boulder really started to grow when the hippies that were trying to make their way to the Bay Area ran out of gas and said, it's pretty here and there's plenty of dope. I'll just hang out here. This is good. And that was the roots of Boulder. Boulder turns out to be 100,000 people. How big is this community? Okay, you're 2.5 times bigger than Boulder. Okay, Boulder has become a nationally recognized startup community because of this incredible density of startup activity and this notion that the entrepreneurs are working together to help each other build something really substantial. The 4 principles that have come out of this for me are as follows. The first is that a startup community has to be driven and led by entrepreneurs. One of the mythologies that exists is that you have to have a great university to be able to have a startup community. You have to have great technology transfer and government, local government activity. You have to have existing large companies to support the ecosystem. Bullshit. It's all bullshit. What you need is entrepreneurs who are dedicated to leading the effort. Not 1, not 2, not 100. Just need a couple. And you'll hear the rest of it, but it builds. Number 2, they have to have a 20-year view from right now. So if Eric signed up for a year, it's not going to work. If the couple of other people that were here at the beginning signed up for a year, it's not going to work. 20 years. You have to have a long-term view. And you have to recognize in that 20-year period there's going to be lots of things that don't work. Lots of ups and downs, lots of macroeconomic things that are confusing. Doesn't matter, because you're building something very local. How many people here think they'll be living in this area 20 years from now? Right? If you're not, that's okay, but that changes the way that you think about what your interaction with the startup community is. If you're committed to be here for 20 years, the likelihood of you being a sustainable leader of the startup community is much higher. If you're not going to be here for 20 years, it doesn't mean you can't play a leadership role, but your mental model is a little different. Number 3, the startup community has to be inclusive of anyone who wants to engage, regardless of what their role or relationship with the startup community is. I like to describe that there's 2 categories. People say, well, I want to get involved, and you know that they want to get involved, but they don't really want to be a leader. They're looking for a job. They're looking for something. And so I like to say, when people approach you, be inclusive, but give them an assignment. And this is true. This is a good life lesson. If somebody wants to engage with what you're working on, awesome. Give them an assignment. 50% of the people you give an assignment to will go away and never come back again. It's the most awesome thing. You just got rid of half your work. They weren't going to do anything anyway. They just went away. The other 50%, some subset of that, let's say half, will do the assignment and come back, and then they'll look for another assignment. You give them another assignment. And you keep doing that. And the assignments can get more significant or whatever, but they keep coming back from, okay, I got that one done. Can you give me another assignment? Okay, here's another assignment. But the other category doesn't just come back and give you what the assignment was, but they keep going. And they take it further. And then they just don't ask for another assignment. They just go do the next thing. And it keeps on building. And so you let that dynamic roll, but by making it very inclusive. And then the 4th key principle is that you have to do things that engage everyone in the entrepreneurial community. For a long time, in startup communities, and Boulder had this, and I lived in Boston for 12 years. I saw this in Boston. I saw this in New York. I saw this in the Bay Area. Every little local city has an entrepreneur of the year. The Boulder Chamber of Commerce, the Denver Chamber of Commerce, the Longmont Chamber of Commerce, the tiny little city in Boulder that you never heard of, Chamber of Commerce, has their award dinner for the Entrepreneur of the Year, and the Entrepreneur of the Year gets a plaque and gets to stand up on stage and give a talk. And they have the runners-up and the people of distinction and the person who gets the award for the person who was important to the community that died 2 or 3 years ago. That's now their name. It's like a package. Like they went to Chamber of Commerce school, and here's how you do it. And it's nice, and it's flattering, but it doesn't really do anything. And by the way, it gets boring after a while. Like, when is this dinner going to be over? Right? That's different than, how many people here, have you guys done a startup weekend here? Around here? A couple people done a startup weekend? Was it thumbs up, thumbs down? Okay, thumbs up. Startup weekend is an example. 3 days, 54 hours, you create companies. It's a complete simulation of entrepreneurship. Low risk. After the weekend, if you're not interested in staying engaged, you're done. But you might meet a team of people that you want to keep doing work with, either on the thing you're working on or not. But you get that intense experience of spending 54 hours going from nothing to something. An accelerator program like TechStars, 90 days. You go into the program, start it, you apply, you get accepted, you go in, and 90 days later you come out, have a demo day with the goal of raising a seed round of financing. Many of the companies now that go through TechStars have their financing raised well before demo day. The dynamic of how sort of the accelerator process works. But it's 90 days that gets involved the mentors, the local entrepreneurs, people that are in different areas that are interested in these types of companies, the venture capital investors, angel investors. We have hack stars, so we have technical people that don't know which job they want to take yet, but they want to be involved in an entrepreneurial company. People that are college interns that are deciding to spend their summer on it because instead of going and getting a stupid job, they want to be around entrepreneurship. And many of them end up getting jobs in these startups or maybe starting their own company. So it's a way of engaging the entire stack. So think about that concept. You want to create a great startup community here. It's actually pretty easy. The entrepreneurs lead. You have to have a long-term view. You have to be inclusive of anyone that wants to engage in whatever way they can. View it as a big additive over time. And you have to do substantive things that engage the entire community. This, I don't know, you don't call this a meetup. What do you call this? Or do you call it a meetup? No, the meeting. Okay, so in Boulder we have once a month New Tech Meetup, the monthly meeting like this, open coffee club, every other week at a coffee shop, anybody that wants to show up, hang out, and just talk. Again, having things in the community that are easy to do. If you send me an email and say, I'm interested in getting connected into Boulder, I'm going to be in Boulder next week, I'll send an email out to 7 or 8 entrepreneurs, random ones. I'll try to match them up with what you're interested in, and you'll have 7 or 8 meetings within an hour, right? If you're moving to Boulder and you're looking for a job, I'll email you to the CEO list of all the CEOs of all the companies in Boulder. That's a self-managed list. There's no magic to the list. If you're a CEO, you're on the list. You just put yourself on the list if you want to be. So building those sorts of structures don't require a nonprofit. They don't require anything other than some entrepreneurs who take it on themselves to lead that activity and to continue to do it. If you look at Boulder today, there's probably 20 or 30 people that are the identifiable leaders in a pool of probably 100 entrepreneurs who provide leadership across the startup community in a population of 100,000 people, of which probably 10 to 20% of them are, my guess is 10,000 of the 100,000 people that live in Boulder are actively involved in a startup, either as an entrepreneur or employee of those startups. Probably about 10%, somewhere between 5 and 10% of the entire community. It's very possible. So that's where I wanted to go with the two sort of threads. I think where y'all are here is awesome. It's great to see a room like this. It's great to hear the kinds of stuff that's happening, and it's exactly the organic process of starting with 6 and just doing things and continuing to do and continuing to do and continuing to do. All right, so let me do 2 things. One is my email address is brad@feld.com. brad@feld.com. My Twitter handle is bfeld, F-E-L-D. I probably should try to get Brad Feld. That's funny. I wonder who has that. Brad Feld dude.
He's been getting a lot of tweets.
He's been getting a lot of tweets. He's a really happy dude, right? I'm happy to get email from anybody in this room. Just remind me that I was here, so I have context. Yes, I really was here. But just say, I saw you at the SCV Startup thing, blah, blah, blah. Recognize that I get a lot of email a day. So be to the point, and if there's something I can be helpful with, specifically ask. If I said something that doesn't make sense or that you disagree with fundamentally, I'm much more interested in that kind of feedback than, hey, Brad, great talk. So there's a type of personality that's called intrinsically motivated versus extrinsically motivated. I'm very far on the end of the spectrum of intrinsically motivated, and what motivates me is learning. So I love to learn, especially things that I could do better or articulate better or be clearer about. So if anything didn't resonate or ring true, tell me. Let's do Q&A wherever you want to go, any topic you want.
What happened to 10x 5 years?
10x 5 years? What's that? That I have to get 10x in 5 years? That's how I am as a venture?
Venture capitalist basic premise.
Well, I thought Republicans were for small government. Things change. And in fact, the thing of the shtick that VCs have around, here's what I have to do. There's a great cliche. Every venture capitalist I've ever made, their fund is in the top quartile. That I've ever met, their fund is in the top quartile. 100% of venture capitalists are in the top 25% of performance. And anybody ever been on the receiving end of an investment banker pitch? They give you these graphs and pages of league tables, and they always have one that they're the one. They're the number one. They're the best one. Doesn't matter how shitty a firm they are. They always are the best one in something. The best one at drawing in purple ink on a white paper with and it's the same kind of thing. It's like, yeah, sure, VCs would love to get 10x in 5 years. That's awesome. It doesn't happen very often. And so the idea that your business on day one, when you think about your business idea and you can show a plan that's going to get you 10x in 5 years, if a VC is evaluating what you're doing that way as an early stage venture, my view is it's insanity. They have no way to evaluate that. As an early stage company, the only thing I can guarantee you is that whatever your forecast is, it will be wrong. I
don't disagree with that.
I understand. The only part of your forecast as an early stage company that you can get right is your expense line. And most people fuck that up too. But your revenue line, you can't get it right. It's not going to be right. And so instead, you then fall into this scenario of VCs, and I talk about it in venture deals a fair amount, VCs spend their life negotiating deals, and I saw this happen, and Microsoft Excel hasn't helped with this. And word processing, by the way, didn't help with lawyers. Before you had word processing, lawyers had to write stuff by hand. Their hands got tired, and they had to give that to people to type, and their hands got tired, and so the documents were shorter. Now you can just pull up an old document that's 100 pages long and just edit it and say, oh, on page 37, I got a good gotcha on page 37. They'll never read that. And spreadsheets the same way. You end up modeling this stuff endlessly. If I own 20% of your company as an investor, and I've put $5 million in to own 20% of your company, and you sell the company for $100 million, that's good. I own 20%, I'm going to get about 20 million, I probably make about 4x. If I put 5 million in your company and own 20% and you sell it for 10 million, if I structured the deal right, I probably get my money back. It's not that complicated. And yet you end up with 5-year projections and IRR analyses. At Mobius, we did these things for every deal we'd approve. We would do a 5-year forecast, and we'd do an IRR based on high, medium, low. And venture firms do this all the time. High, medium, low exit based on some comparable math. And for a mature company that's at a certain stage, that's a later stage investment, you could imagine that that kind of analysis might make sense, holding constant what the public market valuations are. But of course, they fluctuate all over the place too. But for a company that has 3 people and an idea, the idea that that's a relevant analysis is insane. And so as an investor, I come back to, I think every firm should have a strategy. Foundry Group has a strategy. We invest in areas that we know extremely well. We define them as themes. If you go to foundrygroup.com/themes, you'll see them. They tend to be broadly horizontal. They're somewhat abstract. So you look at our themes and say, human-computer interaction is a theme. We believe that in 20 years from now, the way we use computers will be radically different than the way we use them today. In the same way that the way we use computers 30 years ago is radically different than today. I actually believe the machines have already taken over. And they're just very patient. They're waiting for us to enter all of human data into them. They don't have to be in a rush. And it's just to their advantage to hang out and let us do all the work. But that's an example. We think the way we interact with these things are totally different. We think the idea that it will be socially acceptable in a decade to walk down the street and press your fingers on a piece of glass and bump into people, that's not going to be okay. That's not the way it's going to work. Now, you might be going like this 20 years from now. I mean, that's a whole different thing. So we have a series of these themes. We know the themes really well. We know the markets really well. So I will never say to an entrepreneur, tell me what your total available market